Hello, this is Fatih Imral from ISAKA Istanbul. Today I'm going to make a presentation to you about the practical use cases of a SIEM to pinpoint certain threat hunting scenarios. Threat hunting is basically the activity of pinpointing potential attackers in your network, and then you can follow up with that with much more detailed forensic analysis. But since it is very early to identify who is doing malicious things in your networks, it is a very important activity. There are, of course, other tools available and you should use for supporting this activity, such as EDRs and network-based IPSs and other new developed tools to detect potential malicious activities in your network. But SIEM has a specific advantage above them all, because it has logs and records from all over the network, and from all the endpoints, from all the network equipment. So it has the power of making aggregated searches and making an analytic analysis of what's going on in your network. That's why it is indispensable, whatever your information security investments might be. SIEM is mostly coming into play with its correlation power, but I believe this is where the analytic search capability of a SIEM tool is where it really shines. So I will try to give you some practical examples how we can use its abilities to identify something malicious going on with your network. Well, I will start with a very basic scenario, which is a brute forcer in your network. Somebody, it could be a machine, it could be some internal employee of yours, malicious employee, or some real attacker which managed to get into your network by using a malware scenario or something else. People watching us will realize this Hydra tool if they are familiar with the offensive tools and tactics. It's a simple password brute forcing attack tool. Here I am using the administrator account and trying to crack this user's password with a word list, which is a very famous one, RACU word list. Again, the offensive security guys will realize it immediately. And I'm going to try to log on to a server in my network. I did that actually previously, so we will have the logs of this activity. 254 servers SMB port will be brute force basically for the administrator account. So if we have a SIEM tool available, and if we are capturing logs from our network, we can make a very simple aggregation query like this. Here we use the taxonomy authentication.fail. These are some specifics of the SIEM tool that I used specifically, but there will be similar taxonomies, there will be similar statements, query syntaxes, grammars available to you with your own SIEM tools. I'm trying to focus on what I'm looking at in here. I'm doing this since I am looking for brute force attacks, I'm using this taxonomy which is available to me, and I am using source IP equals to star because I want all the documents to have a source IP field in them, so that I can pinpoint a certain source IP which is trying to do malicious activity in my network. The rest of the query focuses on the numbers of failed authentication attempts grouped by source IPs, and I'm basically sorting them out in descending order, and some IP .99 is quickly coming into the picture with the highest number of failed authentication attempts. I can also try to make sure if this is really a malicious activity or somebody misconfigured a certain service which is using a wrong password to authenticate to a server. By limiting the time span to 10 seconds, I'm already grouping by with the certain IP address, which I'm suspecting that a certain malicious user is on, or some malware is active on it. And I'm limiting the time spans to 10 seconds and see that a lot number of malicious activities happen in 30 seconds. So this is a real good indication that something bad is going on with this IP address. This is actually our firewall IP address, and I did this activity by connecting through the VPN to my office network. So after you dig into those log records, you will, I believe, realize that in a short period amount of time, and then you can follow up with the additional activities which VPN user logged on recently or around this time. So you can positively identify which VPN account had been compromised or somebody is doing something bad. Another scenario is basic web fuzzing activity. Again, the offensive security guys will realize this tool immediately. Nikto is basically a backend scanner, which is not following the links that it sees, but trying a database, a list of URLs to see if they are available on the other side. So the characteristics of such a scanning is that the scanner is not looking for what is already in there. It is trying to figure out if certain links or certain resources are available on the web server. So we are supposed to see lots of unnecessary requests or abnormal requests on the web server logs. So again, we can, here we are using log enrichment capability of our SIEM tool. Again, this is, there will be similar capabilities in other SIEM tools, but here I don't want to find out which IPs are web servers and which servers should I focus on. I'm just using a criteria of saying that log type is equal to web. That means logs coming from every web server will be analyzed for my query. Here we are using a very powerful feature of a analytical search capability of our SIEM tool, which is distinct count. You can see it here, DC, which stands for distinct count. This means that I'm looking for a node IP, which is the server, a source IP pair with the highest number of distinct count page requests. I will try to elaborate this a bit more. Here in the topmost record, you see the source IP .99, the destination IP .240 had been requested for 3,808 different pages. They're not the number of requests, they're the number of different pages requested by this source IP. So this is, if you have some offensive background, you will immediately realize that this is no good. Somebody is trying to brute force your web server, web application to find out anything, a weak point basically, to intrude into your web application. Again, we are using another capability of this specific SIEM tool, which is the values statement. I might go through the specific and detailed log records to see which resources were requested for each request, but I can use this capability to see all of them in a single record here. By using the values statement, I'm asking the SIEM tool to get every unique resource that it can use, the page with the name of page here, and list them for me in a single cell. Here, this is the continuation of this huge record. Here we can see some interesting requests such as dir C column \\. There are various requests: admin1 ASP, admin1 HTML, admin1 PHP, admin1, admin2 ASP. This is obviously a brute forcing activity which is specific to web application attacks. We might want to understand the nature of this attack better by looking at the individual log records. By narrowing down our search to the specific source IP and specific destination node IP in here, I might go and see what's really happening by looking at the log records, individual log records. Here we can see that the user agent header of the requests include the word Nikto, which is an obvious sign of the Nikto tool living on our log records. By using this information, I might try to have a better understanding of using the table capabilities of the SIEM tool by listing user agents and what's the page requested by this user agent. So we can 100% make sure that this is not a good activity. There's someone attacking us from the firewall account, firewall IP address, and it is probably someone connected to our network through the VPN, and then you can go and look for the real culprit by using this information. Here we might be more interested in when this specific attack happened. We can use the time spent statement again by limiting the time spent to 10 minutes to see in which interval did this attack take place. So we can look for the VPN connection logs for this specific period of time. Another scenario of ours is DNS tunneling, which is very popular by the APT attackers. It is basically using the DNS messages to communicate with the C2 server, command and control server, or the server controlled by the attacker outside of the victim network. I'm not going to go much into detail because it's somewhat complicated to implement this kind of a tunneling attack, but I will mention the key things throughout the presentation pages to, at least to give you some idea about how this kind of an attack can take place. Here we need to, if I'm the attacker that want to use DNS tunneling to intrude into a network, such as an APT attack, which is going to take a long time span, I'm going to buy a domain names, such as here, it is edaselectric.info. I'm going to define the DNS server records to the domain name sellers portal, so that the people who are trying to get some address of a domain, fully qualified domain name from edaselectric.com will come to those DNS servers, which I will be sitting and waiting for my zombie computers to connect back to me, or it could be a person, it doesn't matter. Here I rent a virtual machine from Microsoft Azure or some other platform, it doesn't matter. I'm going to use it for malicious purposes, but the cloud provider will obviously not be aware of this. I'm basically renting a simple virtual machine here, but I'm going to install iodine, which is the attacking tool which we will use on it. I will need to create the DNS records for the name servers. Obviously, these are kind of complicated, but if you want to watch this again, it will make more sense. Here are the commands which should be run from this on the server side and on the victim side. After running those commands,
each side will have a new interface to communicate with each other. The communication will be happening through the DNS requests and responses. So if the network that the attacker is trying to attack doesn't have complicated DNS security tools, DNS security monitoring, then the victim will have no idea what's going on in between this machine and the DNS server, because the DNS requests should go to the internet, and this is how the TCP/IP is working, basically. This is a simple example that on the server, this is a server. This is the server that we rented from Microsoft Azure, and we installed iodine on it, and we ran the previous commands I showed you. This is my SSH client command connecting to our victim machine with the BT risk username. I know the password, obviously, and I can log on to the victim machine from the outside. It is like, I mean, as an attacker, it is like I'm on a console on the victim machine right here. But the defendants, the blue team of or if it ever exists, will not be aware that this kind of activity will be happening in their network. So if we think from a blue point perspective, blue team point of view, we should be expecting some DNS queries with a large length, actually, because to carry that much information from one side to another, you have to use the DNS names, machine names, which are longer than expected, which are longer than usual, actually. So in this query, we are looking for DNS queries again. I don't want to deal with which servers are DNS servers and etc. I'm using the enrichment capability of the SIEM tool again, and I want source IPs to be available in the documents that I want to search. I'm using another specific statement available to me, which is eval, which is basically creating new fields from the existing fields. Here I'm trying to figure out the length of the domain names requested, and I'm taking the maximum query length from each source IP and sorting them in descending order. Here you can say that there are other IPs with 252 characters of length of DNS queries. That's right, but this is where you know your network comes into play. If you know your network, if you were in Turkey, you would know that these two are the 195 IPs are the DNS servers of TTNet, which is a major telecom operator here, and this is very well known by everybody around the world. This is the Google DNS server name, server IP. So this IP.32 stands out as our internal IP address, and something that is going on in this IP address. We can. I mean, we need to make some more queries about it, but it's not. It doesn't look good. I mean, nobody writes down 252 characters for a domain name. I think. I mean, it's not usual. Another indicator might be the number of requests. Here I am querying for the aggregated number of counts per source IP, how many DNS queries have been made by each source IP address in my logs. And I can see the .32 IP address again. In addition to the interestingly high DNS query, we can see that a high number of DNS queries are made by this IP address. We're always interested in when the malicious activity takes place, and if some malicious activity appears in very short time frames, then it is probably something bad. Here we can see that
in 1 hour periods, we see that other IP addresses comes into play. I already said before, this 2.99 is my firewall IP address, so it's normal to see this IP address, but I'm much more interested in the .32 IP address. So I'm narrowing down my query to exclude the firewall IP address and the famous Turkish DNS server IP address here. So I can see that .32 had 945 DNS queries in a single hours period. So it's a strong indication that something happened during this time period. Well, I can go into the log records again to see what really happened, to understand the nature of the activity here. Here we can see that the base domain name of each query is edaselectric.info, but before that, some abnormal host names are requested. I might want to see if all of the log records included this base domain name. I can use another capability of the SIEM tool here. It's a substring function I can use with eval. Here I'm trying to get the last 17 characters out of the name we queried. So by making an aggregation on it, I can obviously see that all of the queries are made for the edaselectric.info base domain, but all different and interesting host names. Again, I can have a look at the details of it, and by using the tabling capability of the SIEM tool, I can see that the domain part, which I created by using the substring function, are all edaselectric info. And again, using the value statement, which I mentioned before, the unique values that we see in the records, we see very interesting host names queried. These are not obviously real hosts. These are used for trafficking information in and out of our network. I will continue with the HTTP C2 activity in our network. In a malicious software trying to communicate with its command and control server, it is most probably will be trying to communicate with the C2 server every certain amount of time, but it will not be similar to a user activity. It will do it every same period of time. And this is a simple code which is trying to simulate this activity. Here, my code is trying to reach out to a domain name in the internet, www.btrist.com, every 120 seconds, which is 2 minutes. And with this offensive security knowledge, I can be looking for network activities which are happening periodically and with the same intervals all the time by using the SIEM capabilities. The query you see here is a mouthful. Obviously, I'm not going to go and try to explain everything, but here I'm trying to focus on the delta between the requests here, and I'm trying to calculate the standard deviation of this delta. The smaller the standard deviation means more periodical the activities are. So in here we can see the activity happening between .31 and this external IP address using this 443 HTTPS port. It has the lowest standard deviation number here, and it also has a big number, a good number of count here, 320 requests. I mean, although this was a simulation of an activity, it's still a high number of requests. In a real scenario, you will probably see thousands and tens and thousands of activities, which would make this activity much more suspicious. again, we might need to go into the log details to figure out some other things. Here, I'm going to, which we use this technique most of the time by when we're doing web application penetration testing. We are trying to figure out the regular request size and regular response size to differentiate them between if some error occurred when we requested something out of the web server. Here we try to make a table out of the request size and response size, and we see them, the sizes are very similar, which also indicates that the requests are the same and responses are the same. And this is, if you are accustomed to C2 activity, which is very typical for this kind of bad malicious activity going on in our networks. As a last scenario, which is a very basic scenario, it's a port scanner scenario. Again, let's consider that someone from our network is trying to port scan some other internet server or some other internal server, but here the critical thing is that we should be able to collect the logs of this network activity. So I don't want to mislead you by saying that you can pinpoint anybody doing some port scan in your internal network. You cannot, because if there is no firewall in between the attacker and the victim server, then you will not be able to collect the log records, so you will not be able to make those analysis. But consider that you have an office in Germany and you have an office in Turkey, for instance. You can find if someone from Germany is attacking some server in Turkey or the other way, because you have a firewall in between and you have the logs available to you. In other cases, this would not be possible, unfortunately. Here, I'm using one of the capabilities which I mentioned before, the distinct count of destination ports. Any client trying to have network access to any other server will use its ports, obviously, but any client trying to access 1,877 ports of another server, which is not definitely normal. So this will make some port scanners out immediately. This kind of query will help you figure out some port activity happening, port scanning activity is happening in your network. Again, we can try to find out in which time period this activity happens. So if we see a higher number accumulated into specific time intervals, we can make sure that something bad is happening from this .32 IP address to an external IP address. Basically, it's within two hours, there had been several port scanning activities in between them. As a last word, I'd like to emphasize that during our engagements, I observed that most companies who have a SIEM product available to them doesn't have the skills to use them effectively. That's I believe stemming from the lack of offensive security knowledge. If they had more offensive security knowledge, they would be much more able to devise some better queries to identify some red teaming activities. So buying a SIEM tool alone doesn't help you much, other than looking for specific events by using search capabilities. You have to have skillful people, as me and all of the professionals mention time and time again. So spend resources and time to educate your people, your blue team people, and teach them offensive tool capabilities. Then you will be making much more out of your SIEM infrastructure available to you. That's all from my side. Thank you very much for your listening. Have a good day.